Okay. Hello, welcome to the ArcVida Rise networking, effective networking strategies. This is our second prompt around online networking and all of the ins and outs of it. And I've talked to Alyssa. We've been chatting today about uh, kind of that, like the idea of just being social online in a professional way and what that means and not how it doesn't have to be so scary. So what do you think, Alyssa?
Yeah, I agree. And thank you, by the way, for those of you who are giving us input and questions. So this conversation, we are very intentionally talking about both what Lucy and I personally know, of course, but also what ArcVida has learned over, we've helped thousands at this point, hundreds, I don't know, thousands job seekers make great transitions. And Rise is a professional networking site. So this isn't just us chatting, it's really what we've done in preparation for answering your questions is thinking about what we know
Yeah.
as businesses. So just kind of as preparation there. And definitely to respond to what you just said, Lucy, online networking is about social connection. So as much as you wouldn't jump in and pitch someone at the grocery store for, something you're selling, like you're going to want to have a relationship. You're not trying to have some cold transaction back and forth. So showing up as a human is kind of job number one in an online context.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that, there's especially since COVID, there's been, a more structured approach to a lot of kind of online networking, maybe groups that have breakout rooms and all sorts of stuff. But I also like, some of just the individual ones, to not make it so intimidating, but it's different for people. Some people want more of a group setting and some people might want more of a one-on-one. Um, do you have any that you particularly like in this context of transformational connection rather than transactional?
Um, well, I think so. I think you're kind of referencing live online events too. Is that what you're referencing in that? Or are you referencing like one-to-one community or
So
social?
like for instance, like a community, I'm in like a Slack group that organizes like one-on-one conversations for networking, or like lunch club is another one that's pretty
Oh,
common, right?
yeah, I've done that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I guess I think of this in the online, any kind of online connection, whether it's an event or a Slack group or certainly social media, as the online portion. And then
Yeah.
with the goal, generally, not always, of moving towards an offline connection or virtual coffee if you want to keep it online. So I think the one-to-one in the, one lunch club or coffee or conversation. I love walk and talks. Like it's after you know me for a while, if you're like, hey, let's catch up, I'm like, great, we should both walk. So, that I look at as sort of the next step after
Mhm.
networking, where you're actually making it more of a one-to-one.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Okay.
But I think the other, so I'd love to hear how you engage socially on, you know, from a professional context. Some of the things that I've done or do on a pretty regular basis is I spend a little bit of time, not a lot of time. I'm on LinkedIn a lot and now on Rise, of course, but just engaging like, oh, you got a new job, congratulations. Oh, you're sharing a picture of the car you gave your nephew, like whatever, like just being human by connecting. And then I have also over time, I've connected with really other humans who are on these social platforms. So when they post something, I try to respond in a way that's human back. So commenting to keep their conversations going. And certainly this isn't day one stuff, but thinking about following, 1, 2, 5, 10, 30 people who that are posting stuff that's interesting and vice versa, you start becoming more of a social conversation. And so that's one thing I think as a beginning a social connection. And then another thing is really around sharing your own stuff. So I'm curious what your strategy is on this, Lucy. in my family, I'm sort of the back office, a background person. One of my brothers is an entertainer, so he's the front and center. But
Yeah.
over time, I've gotten a lot more comfortable about just posting something I'm inspired by, or a picture of some people that I met at a business lunch, or something that's more human, and chatting about that. I try to do that probably 2 to 3 times a week now.
Yeah. I think that's really, that's some kind of great advice I've actually gotten in the past around, it's kind of hard to network or get connected when you're hiding out. And, so you have to also like show up and, make yourself available. It's like, hey, here's some stuff I'm really interested in. Here's what I'm, um, and obviously commenting and engaging is really big, um but also just sharing what's on what you're interested in and what you're working on and what lights you up. Then other people see and start to make those connections around, if they then see an opportunity or a person they know that they're like, oh, they can start to make connections because you've just kind of presented. And so it's hard to show up, but at times if you're shy or you're kind of like, oh, like what if people think this is silly, but I think that it's really powerful. um
Yeah, I think that point about it's hard to show up is really big. And to your point, if you're shy, I'm actually going to throw a counter argument back, which is I think it's great if you're shy because you have all this time. You can take as much time as you want to edit your post. And you can really, if you're, for example, you can share what you're working on. I've seen a lot of people sharing tools that they're using. I don't know if you've seen this,
yeah,
like
totally.
taking. Um, I am a reader, so I love a book review. Like, even if I don't like the book, even if I don't think I'm going to read it, I will stop and look at your content if you're sharing a book you're reading.
Mhm.
So I think that, if it's not a picture of you at a networking event with people, if you're more shy, there's a lot of ways
Yeah,
to like show more about, your skills, what you care about, your value.
exactly. Yeah, share some insights about a book that you read. Like it doesn't necessarily mean like social. I mean like maybe you're a little shy on posting about what you're doing, but I think generally people are really celebratory about it. That especially, yeah, and the right people will resonate with it. If you're giving your review of, leadership and self-deception, like is a great book, right? Then someone's gonna be like, wow, tell me more. Or maybe you just got really into painting and you just want to share that. At least it creates this more whole personality around you online that people can then connect with, not just this face who's known in marketing at this company.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, and if you're, I would say our ArcVida's tip is if you're not posting at all, start with your profile, make sure there's an interesting picture and some personal stuff. If you speak additional languages, if you're very involved with a hobby, volunteer work that's important to you, give people something, going back to the interest statement we worked on in the
Yeah.
prior session, like give people something on their profile and then start just once a week and don't share my post as your share. Like,
Or resharing. Yeah.
yeah, do something that's yours and just once a week and see how it goes. And it will feel probably like you're talking into a void at first. Have you had that feeling, Lucy? If you shared some
Yeah,
stuff?
I think I have. I will say not to, toot our own horn, but Rise, we really do want to be a place that celebrates like all the wins, like the big and the small and the overcome. Because sometimes like posting on something like LinkedIn can feel very intimidating because it's like, oh, is this big enough or is this valid enough? But on Rise, it's like people are like, I finished my design portfolio today. Cool. We will celebrate that, and that's something that you can share. And now I know more about you. When you might not say that on LinkedIn, you might have to have a more thoughtful whole thing that you're creating. But we really want to celebrate easy, quick wins. But then we also have portfolios and spotlights and bigger things you can post. But then also on social, and we will get to that too on other places to connect. So I think that's probably you know my lead into that, but want to make sure there's nothing else that is on your mind for this
Yeah,
topic.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Something that we were getting, feedback on and questions around, were kind of like how to know who the right people are to reach out to. It might be kind of scary to, connect, and, why would someone want to talk to me is kind of sometimes how people feel. Um, so I'm curious, I know you guys talk a lot about this in ArcVida, so would love some
We do talk.
input. Yeah.
Um, well, I think there's sort of a two-part answer to this. And the first answer is that people who are generous networkers will connect with you, and people who are not will not. And also, the fundamental error is going in with the what I want. I want a job. I want to pitch you business. Like, I want to meet you. You just want to sell me something. Ugh, right? So the that's it's finding people who are both wanting to be generous networkers, and also giving a hook of why I should connect with you.
Right.
And the other thing is, nobody, we always say this in ArcVida, like every ArcVida client is going to be rolling their eyes right now, but we don't get to feel generous as humans if we're not giving. And so there's all these positive emotions that humans love, right? If you think about even like a physical gift, or if you've ever gotten an opportunity to teach or lead a class or seminar or tutor somebody, like there's a lot of positive emotion that's coming back at you that you don't get if you're not in the position to be generous. So I would say understanding that humans like to feel generous, and that that's only possible if you're asking for help. And then I think the other thing is that everyone gets help and people remember getting help. So, Lucy, when's an example of a time where you've gotten help in a networking sense?
Yeah, I in ArcVida, um, a gal in our cohort, we were just as we were getting to know each other online, started to think about who we wanted to connect each other with. And she connected me with one girl who was just really helpful and helping me, like, it's a completely different industry that I was like, and I was kind of like, what is this like? And she was like, "Oh, you need to talk to like the best manager I've ever had." And he was just like head of revenue at a major company, and hit like was it was like I don't think I would have been able to talk to this person myself. Like, it was just felt like this level, like leapfrog up to really impressive people. And from there he was like, "Oh, this is great. Let me connect you with it." So it just felt like this huge help. So that was directly from ArcVida. Um, and I think uh in times of just sometimes just reaching um out, even, or actually I've had it say in some smaller communities, like on a Slack group, where I'm like, "Hey, here is kind of what I'm just asking, if you guys know anyone I can connect with." And people are really generous to be like, "You got to talk to my friend." uh Even if they're not giving all their time, they know somebody who they want to introduce you to. And so that was like another really helpful thing for networking, that I wouldn't have even been connected to that person, but someone else was that middleman. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that story. And the someone else being the middleman, of course, you're going to come back to that person and say like, "Oh my gosh, this is what happened. It's really transformational for me. I'm so happy you made this introduction." And like, wow, they feel good about that. And then I guess my point, kind of in response to your story too, is like if somebody approaches you for an introduction or a conversation, you don't think like, why would you be bothering me? You think like, oh, people have been so willing to talk to me or introduce me. You have this story in your mind of this wonderful introduction that made a big difference for you. And so you're in a mental space as a professional to pay it forward.
Absolutely. And I think, there is also, on the flip side, a little bit of like, I mean, I've experienced this myself. If someone's like, "Oh, can you please talk to my friend? I would love to introduce you to her. She's trying to get into marketing." And it's like, "Me?" Like, it feels like a little bit like, "Oh,
Yeah,
wow." Like, I'm
it's
honored, you know?
so successful and I admire you. So I'm gonna, yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, you're giving someone the, by asking you to talk to somebody, I'm communicating my respect for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a little like potentially like a nitty gritty, like a little bit of a thing for sometimes like how we think about who to reach out to is maybe not always you actually I'm curious what you think of this. Maybe not always like the top person, but like that next level or they're the people who are like coming up into that space because it's almost like they still remember maybe more recently what it was like to be in your shoes and are
Yeah.
still really honored by that like oh wow like yeah versus someone who might be like hounded all the time.
As you build your network, ArcVida's term for this is near peers.
Mm,
Within a couple of years of your experience or
yeah,
level, so you're a director now, right?
yeah,
So yeah, other directors, that's who you should be building your network with. Like senior VPs, like, I mean, you can, but it's just, yeah. So really the thinking about as a, if you're more junior, just coming into the workforce, connecting people within, we say within 5, but really within 3 years of your work experience is even better. And then as you become more experienced, then it's really about level of responsibility. So if you're a director of marketing of a startup, a small startup, that's a different level of responsibility than director of marketing for Airbnb, right? So really thinking about both title and level. I have some ideas and I made a few slides, so it's not just talking head style of who to connect with online as you're connecting socially. So let me share my screen
yeah.
if I can actually, yes. Okay, so do this. Oh, let me go back here. All right. So can you see my screen okay?
Yeah.
So, okay. So we think of, Arcvita thinks of networking, of course, as workforce focused conversations with an intent to learn. So online networking, we're thinking of social connections for professional goals. So social, right? Connections, not transactions, and really thinking about your goals. These are the 4 kinds of people we're wanting most professionals to connect with. And certainly if you're in a position where you're just building your network, for whatever reason, if you're returning to the workforce after being a caregiver, or if you're, coming after graduate school or something, this is where you start.
Mhm.
So natural affinity groups, and I'll talk about that a little bit more because that's kind of a jargony, jargony phrase. And then industry affiliations. And so industry would be, Arcvita thinks about, or broadly speaking, industry is the way that businesses are organizing themselves. So technology industry or the education industry or healthcare, that's industry. And then functional affiliation is, for example, Lucy, you're in marketing, right? So marketing, human resources, finance, sales. If you're thinking like, well, I don't know what I can't find anything that's I'm really interested in from a functional thing. Mine is too small, then you need to zoom out a level. So if you're like, I can't find, let's say you're a social media content creator. You're like, I can't find any professional organizations for social media content. Zoom out. You need to be in marketing. So that's sort of the trick there. And then job search research is, of course, if you're, very far along in your process and you're already know what you're excited to do. And that's when you're specifically talking to companies.
Absolutely.
Okay, so here, sorry, anything you would add to this list of sort of who to connect with, like how to find people to connect with?
I think this is great. A great list.
Um, I'm wondering if I'll expand on this, but I'll tell a story in a second. So this is what Arcvita talks about when we talk about natural affinity groups. So, um, belonging and feeling like you're a part of something, feeling that you can bring your whole self to a room or a situation or a job is really about this emotional experience, right? Like, so my analogy is like, if you're going to brunch with your friends, you're not wondering if you belong, right? If you're going home for Thanksgiving dinner, you might have some other emotions, but you don't wonder if you belong, like you're in it. And so, one of the best ways to start with that belonging feeling and really to connect with people at that level of energy is to find these places where you're already part of it, right? So every professional should be in their alumni associations. Many alumni, usually it's run by the alumni career offices, have online platforms. Are you a part of any of these for your school, Lucy?
Yeah, I actually they just developed like a whole platform that's pretty cool. So it's I'm in there now, and it's been fun.
Good, yeah. So
Yeah.
there's a couple big sort of provide vendors who do
Hmm.
this for universities. So those are a great place. And then often there'll be meetups, local, sometimes online. I feel like the local ones are better. And certainly if you have bigger colleges or universities, then they'll be bigger, but you should always be part of them. Um, and then, oh, and just a side note to that, sometimes there'll be like loose associations, like for example, there's a group of women's colleges that they call themselves Seven Sisters. And so they have like 15 different Facebook groups for like Seven Sisters of New Jersey or whatever. And so those are places where um, you would have that affinity, even if your school was smaller, because the school alumna decided to affiliate. Colleagues, of course. My tip on colleagues is actually to connect right when you start working with them
Yeah.
for a couple of reasons, but that's great. Friends and neighbors. So this is, you can kind of decide what you want to do, but I like to connect with my friends and neighbors because you just never know who knows someone and they are going to know you in a different context. Do you connect for like on professional networks with your friends and neighbors?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think especially, I think your professional life is a huge it's a chunk of your time, right? And being able to it's like be a friend through that as well and see like do you need help finding your next role or like how can I partner with you on something? It's absolutely. I think that this is great in my world.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I actually do that a lot. And I didn't even think of it because I was thinking of the other side, like, oh, what are you going to need from this network? But like, yes, and you're going to give to
Yeah.
your network too. That's part of this, is you're going to be giving and helping. I put sports teams here. This is not just sports. This is the people you go to yoga with, swim class, like anything you're doing, you should, your hiking meetup, connect with people on a social platform that's professionally focused. Of course, volunteer. I put that as like if you're building a Habitat for Humanity home or volunteering at PTA, like you just never know. I was volunteering at the PTA with somebody and she made a joke to me about being a volunteer. Are you just a volunteer? And I was laughing. I was like, no. So she's not either. She's a partner in a law firm. But we just, of course we're going to connect online, but we just hadn't gotten to it because we were working on something else. So it's a great way to connect with people that are already part of your crew.
Yeah.
And then to your earlier story, this is who you can ask for introductions
Mm.
or the down low, like, hey, tell me about your company. Tell
Yeah.
me your work.
Yeah.
That my share. Anything to add on this list for natural affinity in your experience or things you recommend?
Mm. I think I think sometimes the places part of networking we mentioned in the last uh series was or the last video was around showing up consistently. So the places that you are consistently like your yoga studio or the place you volunteer like just that also has a whole online element potentially. Yeah.
That's a fair point. Several of these, particularly the friends and neighbors and the sports team, are going to be people that you also know offline. And a lot of people that ArcVida works with have never connected with them in a professional context.
Hmm.
So yeah, this is a way to make deepen those relationships. All right, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen now.
One group I didn't see on there, just I know some people kind of are when networking gets like a loose term, right? It's like, but the group I didn't see on there were like hiring managers or recruiters, like I know potentially maybe someone that you know is a hiring manager, but specifically for the purpose of, hey, I'm applying for a job, would you consider that networking?
I mean, we always recommend that people have both research conversations and then after they know enough about why they're a top candidate and why they will thrive and belong in a role, then to have somebody, most often, not in a government job, but most often that you'll be referred in. So you're not cold applying. Um, I would say you can just kind of see how it goes. We have definitely have actually Corinne from your cohort reached out to a CEO directly and got hired. She's also brilliant. So like, I hesitate to use someone who's really brilliant as this like
Yeah.
tactic. Um, but yeah, I've personally had experience of after I did an interview connecting with the person I interviewed with on LinkedIn. So I think it's fine. It's not definitely not a primary tactic.
Yeah.
There's a lot that you need to like having a referral in first before you connect with and I generally don't advise people. ArcVida doesn't generally advise people to connect with recruiters.
Yeah.
Also, just to point some of you back to the blog, to ArcVida's blog, if you're wondering how to interact with recruiters, we have a pretty recent blog post on job search resources and how to use them. So I guess our answer is kind of no.
Yeah.
Mm.
Certainly. There's steps before, right? Like,
With obvious exceptions like
yeah.
Corinne, the CEO on a Slack group, and got hired. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, generally no, but great resource.
yeah,
Uh,
and the other thing I would say, the other exception is if you have a friend, I wouldn't say direct connection. So we had a client who um I can't remember the exact flow of it, but a former ArcVida client helped a current client because the former client was recruiting for a role and the current client was connected to somebody who sent her the role. And then that connection emailed the former client, was like, hey, Erica, this person seems great. What do you think? And then she got hired. The current client got hired. So that is probably the better way. Like Lucy, if you see someone I'm connected to that's hiring, you
uh-huh.
hey, Alyssa, talk me up. Tell them how wonderful I am.
Yeah.
Then you're adding the social proof.
Yeah. Well, I think that that leads well into kind of our final point of, talk me up, talk about how great I am, but also the value that you bring, right? So curious, some people might feel there's some, it's like one, the value that I provide in my, as what I know and do and all of that, but also the value I provide in networking and being a connection. So, how do you help people build confidence uh, in knowing that they have value and how to bring it?
Oh, I'm going to quote Oprah here. Oprah is a fabulous billionaire, y'all. Um, she networks. So Oprah has this line that I heard a long time ago about how attention is love.
Mm.
So that always stuck with me because if you walk into a room and you say hello and nobody answers you, you don't feel very loved. Right? So from an online perspective, again, you're socially connecting for professional goals. Um, Showing up to help other people with their professional goals or to celebrate in your example the new portfolio, like that's attention and attention is love and that's a lot of value. Like from a pure like, am I creating money by celebrating your new portfolio? No, no. But there is value to that. And then the other thing is that going back to this idea of relationship and not transaction, some of what I'm going to show up and provide value in my network will never benefit me personally. So, a friend of mine, Slavka, has a business, and her business is a small business where she, and you'll resonate with this, Lucy, I know, but she finds in home caregivers for families who need extra support. And she has this huge network of caregivers who are qualified and background checked and ready to work. And she matches personalities, like inviting someone to your home to live with your parents. Like, this is a lot, right?
A lot. Yeah.
Like, it's not a tech business. She's not serving ArcVida's clients. Like, she and I probably, I mean, we could find a way to work together, but I don't know how. It doesn't matter. Every time I see anything about her business or her what she's talking about, I can amplify, I can comment, I can like or share. And of course, if someone ever says to me, like, hey, Alyssa, this is what's happening in my life, oh my gosh, you need a caregiver. Let me connect you to my friend. Right. So I can support her in that way. And people see that online. People see you showing up in a generous way. And even if they never comment on something that I'm, sharing or posting or commenting on, if I reach out to them, you've seen me, Lucy, if you've seen me post 3 or 5 times about some other people's business, and then I reach out to you and I'm like, hey, Lucy, I don't know how things are going for you, but I'd love to meet this connection of yours. You think, oh, this is a generous professional. Like, how could I be generous too? Versus if you never hear or see me supporting anyone else, you're like, what does
Yeah.
she want? Why
Yeah.
she really want
Yeah.
something? What's been your experience with this? How do you experience people creating value?
I think I didn't have the words attention is love, but I think that that is huge. I think um really like amplification is a really great way for value. I think there's a lot of people who do it just so humbly that I admire, that they're just like, oh my gosh, like go check out this person and what she's doing. And it's like, because I admire them, I'm like, yeah, absolutely, And so I think the more you can, I think that's it's also kind of a pillar of rise that we're trying, we're working on helping people feel comfortable with being amplified, and being willing to, uh be part of that. But I think doing it for other people is a really great way to bring value. And I also think there are some tangible things. I think that, you know, you might not feel like you have the strongest network, but being able to connect people, you actually, I think, have more power in that than you think. And I think, but also like, I don't know, people aren't very good at making asks for something, but maybe with someone that you really admire and would like to get to know better, offering like, hey, like I am good at this and this. Is there anything that um can that I can help you with? This is maybe not as relevant. This is something I started doing with friends after um reading about grief, and when people are like, if there's anything I can do, let me know. And I feel like that's often just
That's the worst. It just
like,
means you gave me a job. I'm sad, and you gave me a job of trying to
tell
think.
you what I need.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Yeah. So I really took that to heart, and I was thinking like, okay, what can I offer? And so I had a colleague's mother died and he was gone. And I messaged him and I said, I'm so sorry. Like, here's some things I can write correspondence. I can make travel arrangements. I can order groceries for you online. Like, I just like kind of like if you need help in any of these particular things, I would gladly step up. So it was like what are the things I can do from afar that I actually know I can do, and that might be helpful. And so I've started to think about that when someone presents a situation that they're in, instead of like, if you need anything. And I think that that can apply to online networking.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Um, so some specific questions to ask. are, is there anyone you're trying to meet?
Mm,
Or, Lucy, I know you're in marketing, but I don't actually know who your client is. Like, what's the profile of your client? And then you're going to tell me. And then I can say, gosh, there's a Slack group that I'm a part of, and it seems weird, but I think that your client is really there. Let me send you a link to that. Right. Or, um, sort of peripheral stuff, like if a friend of yours or someone you're socially connected to for professional reasons, but not really a friend, says, oh my gosh, I have no idea what to wear. Like, oh, you know what? There's a sale here. Let me send you a link to that. Like that kind of practical help. Um, Something else I've done, and this is probably a little more relevant. Well, it just depends, right?
yeah,
So I am often introduced to people who other people think I can help. And I always take that conversation. Like I will, if you think that I should talk to this person because I can help them, I will. And so often in that context, and sometimes in other contexts, um, people, there'll be some discussion about a book. And if I say, like, oh, you know what, The Powerful Engagement is a book that really changed how I think about energy, productivity, and fulfillment. It's true. I'm always recommending this book. I'll send it. I'll sit on Amazon right then and send the book.
mm,
And so that's super powerful because that isn't transactional at all. I just sent you a gift, right?
yeah,
And it's cheap, 6, 8, $10. Like, it,
yeah,
and I can do it right then. So it's not weird. Like, so that's something you're not going to use the same technique all the time, but you can. And then when you're reconnecting with somebody, trying to remember what, again, any hook that they've shared online, like, hey, I noticed that you're always sharing that you volunteer for dog rescues. I saw this, article about dog rescue changing post COVID. So, you know, sharing information or an article as a way to be
yeah,
generous.
totally. I think like, I don't know, in social media, I think we do this so often, right? We see a meme that relates to like to someone that we know and we're like, oh, I'm gonna send that to you. And it's like, but thinking about that professionally, like it's not weird. You're like, oh, I know you do this thing. I just read this article. I thought you might like it. And there it's like, wow, thanks for thinking of me. And this is actually really cool. So making it kind of fun. It doesn't have to feel like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I mean too. It doesn't have to, yeah, I love that. A meme about it that's industry applicable. Oh yeah. Like I love that meme. I don't know if you've seen it about like me, BCC or copying everybody and sending the email without the attachment. Have you seen this meme? And it's the staircase full of people ready to load the plane, and then the plane is taking off.
Oh, yeah.
Anything that's like, kind of professional and fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just the concept of like, it's so easy for you to share like something that's funny or whatever with your friends, but just making that same like connection. It doesn't have to be like something funny or a meme, but just more naturally thinking about, oh, like I have people I know who might be interested in XYZ that I'm consuming content wise. And not be so like, okay, what do you do? What can I share? It will become more natural.
Yeah. Um, I think the point about natural is a really good one. Online connections who are local, like invite people to go with you to the alumni event. Bring your um, friend that you met from kickball to the marketing meeting. Like inviting them, even if they don't come. And most people don't come if you invite them to an offline event, but you can use that as an opportunity to be generous. Like, oh, Lucy, I really thought you would love this event. Would you like to come? Like, no, I don't want to come, but thanks for thinking of me. Right. So that's a way that anybody with any level of experience can be generous, is just by, inviting to a virtual or in-person event that seems cool.
This is great. We went really deep on, some of the questions and things that came through, and then, just our own experience and taking experience from ArcVida and Rise to just go pretty deep on what it means to online network and taking the pressure off of it, giving some practical tips. Uh, so now you are hopefully armed and ready to go find more people, connect with people on Rise and LinkedIn and all the affinity groups, and get going.
Yes.